This isn't just a straightforward story of cultural decline overall. I'm Ross Douthat, your host for the Film and Culture series at the Athenaeum Center for Thought and Culture. As I said before, the migration of talent and energy and storytelling from the movies, from the big screen to television, to HBO, to streaming television, has created new artistic opportunities that weren't there in the landscape of 1967 or even 1993. And there really was a golden age of television. I think that golden age has passed for reasons that would require a different series and a different conversation to have, but still there is a richness available on Netflix and HBO and Amazon and everywhere else right now for the television viewer that didn't exist a few decades ago, that enables certain novel kinds of storytelling, even certain works of real genius. So there has been gain as well as loss, and it's important to stress that and not take a purely catastrophizing view of what's happened to cinema and visual storytelling in America. But there are things that the movies as they used to be, that Hollywood as it used to be, offered to American life and to the viewer, people who are to would-be storytellers and audiences alike, that aren't offered in the current dispensation. And so there has been real loss, and it's worth thinking about the specifics of that loss. The first thing that's been lost is less about sort of art and more about the common ground experienced by American society as a whole. Basically, the movies at their peak, and as I've argued, their peak extended in certain ways really until recently, offered a kind of Central American art form, a kind of lingua franca, a kind of shared rituals of initiation, shared conversation pieces, shared cultural reference points. The movies replaced earlier art forms that had played that role to some extent. Novel, poetry even in the 19th century played that role to some extent. Theater to some extent, radio to some extent. All of those art forms still exist. None of them play a central cultural role in American life. The movies took their place, but nothing has clearly taken the movies' place. As successful as streaming television can be, it's too fragmented. It relies on too many different small-scale audiences to provide a real cultural common ground in the way that a hit movie did, again, as recently as 20 or 30 years ago. So there is a sense in which we have passed from a world where the movies were the central art form in American life to a world where there is no central popular art form at all. There's streaming television here, there's blockbuster movies over there, there's video games over there, maybe tomorrow there's some AI-generated fusion of all three, but none of them are creating the kind of common ground that was experienced by moviegoers until quite recently. And that's not the most substantial loss that America has faced in the last 20 or 30 years. You don't want to, over-romanticize the social and civic benefits of lots of 20-year-old guys being able to quote from the same Austin Powers movie, right? It's not the fall of the Roman Empire here, right? But it is good, I think, for a sprawling republic, a continental empire of hundreds of millions of people, to have certain common rituals, certain common cultural touchstones, and the loss of that is a small but real contributor to the general fragmentation and division within American society today. So that's sort of the civic loss. Then there's the artistic loss, because there are things that the movies do or did that their small screen, personalized streaming device inheritors just don't do. There are sort of aesthetic gifts that the movies give that are not given in the same way in their absence. And I'll just offer three of them. First, there's a kind of expansive power that is inherent in the cinematic experience. that is not recreated when you're watching a movie on a television set or on any kind of smaller than that device. And this experience is created in part by just the larger than life visual experience of the screen itself. It's also created by, the complex mix of sort of aesthetic enterprises that go into making that larger than life experience come to life. There was a moment a couple years ago where they tried to get rid of a lot of the technical categories in the Oscars. Not get rid of them, but shift them to a different night and then just sort of announce who had won the awards. Things like sound editing and so on, right? That they thought fewer people would be interested in. And if you remove that from the show, maybe more people will watch it. And it's actually hard to think of a more illustrative move than that kind of diminution of those technical aspects, because those are things that just matter infinitely more to the theatrical experience, how the sound fits together, how the editing fits together to create a kind of total experience. And they do. Those things matter less as you move from the big screen spectacle to the small screen experience, but they matter less because something real is being lost. So there's the power of sort of immersive spectacle that's lost, and then there's also the power that comes with sort of condensation and completeness, right? That yes, a multi-episode, multi-season arc of a television show can get deeper into psychology and character development in certain ways than a 2-hour movie can, but the 2-hour movie can be constructed as a complete self-enclosed work of art much more easily than the sprawling TV show can be. And there's a reason that it's so rare for a TV show to sort of achieve a kind of complete perfection in its run. And it's much more common, to have a bad season or, to have a totally disappointing flop of an ending, because it's supposed to be an open-ended art form where you're sort of making it up as you go along. Whereas like a novel, or play or a poem, a movie is sort of conceived of and then completed before it is delivered to the audience. And there's an opportunity for just a greater narrative perfection, a greater perfection of storytelling in the movies than you have in most television shows. So The Sopranos does many, many things that The Godfather can't do. But as great as The Sopranos is, The Godfather is still a more perfect work of art. And then a third thing that's lost, and maybe this sort of straddles the line between the aesthetic and the civic, right? But we talk about going to the movies, right? And implicit in that going is a kind of going out, an action, a sort of entrance into a world apart from your everyday existence. And this has an aesthetic component where you are giving yourself more fully to the experience of art when you go to the movies than you are when you watch a movie or a TV show or any other production at home. And that connects to what I was saying before about sort of the technical aspects of film, the spectacle and so on, but it's also just a psychological commitment akin to going to the opera or a play or any other performance where you were saying, for this span of time, I am placing myself in a darkened space with other people. It's a communal experience. It's not just a personal experience, but you are sort of offering yourself fully to the production, the experience, the artist in a way that's just basically impossible unless you have, an insane home theater setup and perfect self-control to do at home. There just is no comparison, I think, between sort of the self-gift to the aesthetic experience of going to the movies and what you do when you turn on the TV. But then there's also a sort of social aspect to this, which is that because it is a going out into the world, going to the movies ended up in the former world being embedded into all kinds of social rituals, from teenage hanging out at the mall to the experience of romance and courtship and dating, where a movie, like a dinner, like any other kind of sort of active action in the world, was connected to how we socialize, how we meet, how we befriend people, how we pair off. You embed the movie in the middle of sort of a long social experience where it becomes a thing you're going to with friends and then a discussion point thereafter. And again, some of these things can be partially recreated in the home. You can certainly watch a movie with a significant other, watch a show hanging out with a group of friends, but something social, something of important about social ritual is lost when you lose the experience of going somewhere together, committing yourself to a shared experience that is embedded in a larger set of social rituals connected to friendship and courtship. So there too, there's been loss. It's clearly just gotten a lot harder for Hollywood to create those kind of stars.